Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the live stream. My name is Matt Bailey. I'm the National Ambassador for the Scotch Malt Whisky Society here in Australia, where I'm talking a little bit about 147.1 Jacaranda Jam. Now, this whiskey is in our August Outturn, which is out this Friday. This is a really special month for us because it's the first release of our very first ever Australian whiskey presented to members of the Society worldwide. I really appreciate everyone coming along for this journey with me. I'm going to throw some of the comments up in the stream as we go. Whiskey is my jam. You never disappoint. There you are. There's your comment. And it's the whiskey glass, of course. Thank you so much for tuning in. As I said, this is all about Jacaranda Jam. This is all about this incoming release of the Societies. There it is on screen right now. So you can take a look at 147.1. We've made it to 147. You know what? When I first joined the Society on the team, some of the 132s were just phasing out. So we'd just seen the end of 132.5.6 around that era. There were some old Japanese whiskies that were coming through at the time. After that, we saw 133. I thought that was very exciting, 133. That was an American single malt from Seattle area that was just spellbindingly delicious stuff. We only got a very small allocation of that cask, so we mostly shared it around at events and things. And then we've had 134, 135, 136, and over. And as it grows, as the society's growing, we're now up to 147. We'll soon see 148. We'll soon see 149, and we'll even later down the year we might even see 150. So some very exciting codes coming through. I get excited by new codes just as much as I get excited by revival of old ones. And at the Society, for those who are less aware, we use a coding system to hide the distillery name. That means we're able to source better casks and better spirit through these distilleries without compromising brand or without being overly sort of tied to the brand. We're tied to flavor, and that's what the Society is all about. Now, this month we're releasing, as in this Friday, we're releasing 147.1. There it is on camera. I don't think my Zoom likes that very much. There we go. Oh, there we go. 147.1 Jacaranda Jam in the juicy oak and vanilla flavor profile. And someone says, how exciting is single cask Australian whiskey? Australian whiskey has been going through what I like to call a new era, a new renaissance, if you like. I think Australian whiskey can be broadly broken into three categories, which is what our Outturn does this month. It breaks it into three categories. Here's Outturn again. There's three massive articles in here. Chapter 1 chronicles the, as I said, not so humble beginnings of where Australian whiskey began. The incredible sort of like early days of massive distilleries, even by today's scale, massive distilleries. Distilleries like Warren Heap, like Corio, that federal distilleries, Victoria Valley Distillery. These distilleries that were massive, a lot of it was in Victoria, but parts all over Australia, before it all sort of fell apart. And there's reasons for why it did. And some of those reasons are in, of course, the Outturn. And then the second era, which I like to sometimes remark on, which is the modern era, the resurgence, if you like. Andrew Durbridge, the cellar master, has written about this modern era of Australian whiskey in this Outturn as part 2. That sort of late 80s, early 90s revival, where names like Bob Hope, no, I'm going to get that wrong. Brian Polk. Anyway, sorry, I'm going to get that wrong. Sorry. Patrick Maguire, Bill and Lynn Lark, names like that who were the foundations of where Australian whiskey is today. And they reshaped that industry. And then, of course, part 3, I like to examine part 3, which is kind of, I like to think of part 3 of the Australian whiskey story at the moment as being 2014 onwards. That doesn't sound like a long time, but I think it's a really important shift and really important sort of thing to acknowledge how much it's changed. James Caden, good to see you. A friend of the stream says Aussie whiskey strikes back, if you will. Very true. And oh, look at this. Good morning from SMWS Glasgow venue. Who's that? Who's that behind that? Hello to everyone in our UK branch who's tuning in this morning in your time, this evening my time, to talk about a .1 that the Society's bottled. 147.1, in fact. I'm holding it right here. There's a smidge of a bottle of it here that we filled into some samples, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. I'm going to pour a dram of this now. Here's the magic sound. Boom. And I'm going to talk a bit about this whiskey in particular, because this is in this Friday's Outturn. Now, I'm going to first and foremost apologize to our UK members, our US members, our European members who don't have a chance at this whiskey. I'm sorry, straight up. There's a very, very small portion going to the UK for the vaults, for for archive purposes, because this is a really important milestone for the society, but it is not otherwise being shared around internationally. This one is literally for Australian members, and I'll talk a bit about that in a second. And Ryan, you are correct. It's Aussie whiskey. That's a nobbler, not a dram. That is correct. That is an old school phrase of we don't use dram in Australian whiskey. We use a nobbler of whiskey, and that's actually historically correct. So thank you very much. 147.1 is called Jacaranda Jam. It's 2 years old. It's a little bit over 2 years old. It's not quite 3, but it has to be labelled as a 2 because that's the age that it was in cask, and a little bit longer. And this one is, in fact, the cask type, is first fill ex Apera quarter cask. It was distilled 1st of February 2018, and it's an Australian whiskey bottled by the Society. This is a milestone. This is an important moment for us. This is an important moment for Australian whiskey. That's lovely on the nose. Just lovely. It's like straight away Cocoa Pops. Roasted malt and Cocoa Pop. Pressed flowers. Almost a tiny bit of like salted popcorn. There's something going on in the back there. There's a slight salty popcorn note. I don't want to horse you. I call that when if you're too close to the mic, when tasting a whiskey and all you can hear is all the swishing noises. So some great questions coming through. I'm going to share some of them up on screen here. Was Jacaranda Jam aged in Australia? Yes. I'll do you one better. It was distilled in Australia, aged and fully matured in Australia, and bottled in Australia. That's right. These Society bottles, this one, it was a part bottle. The label's a little bit off because it doesn't matter so much because this was a part bottle. It was never intended to be sold. This one was bottled in Australia by the Society. So the empty glass stock was sent to Australia along with the corks and along with the capsules, and everything was sent here, and the production of this whiskey was made in Australia. I see that as hugely important. You see other independent bottling sometimes of Australian whiskey, and it's always bulk spirit shipped off to somewhere else in the world, and then Australia might get a smidgen of it back here again. You've seen that with quite a few independent bottlers now who have taken casks of Australian whiskey, and I commend them for doing so. It raises profile, and they've sometimes picked out some good whiskies as well. They have sometimes, it's like, well, of course they have. And so that's, yeah, of course. James Caden says yes. In New South Wales, yeah. Distilled, matured, and bottled here. This is the first time I can think of, or maybe the second time, that a Society whiskey has ever been bottled not in the UK. So that means it's entirely an Australian whiskey, single malt Australian whiskey, single cask Australian whiskey in the juicy oak and vanilla profile. I'm going to let that sit in the glass for a minute. Please throw your comments into the stream. There's a lot of people watching, so I'm expecting more comments. Throw some questions out. It's amazing news, Matt. Groundbreaking stuff. It really is. This was quite a labor of love for us. This was, of course, when you're starting any sort of production process like this, the first casks are going to be a bit hard. They're going to be sort of like, we're going to get it right, work out what's working and what's not. And I think we struck that balance pretty nicely. Australian whiskey does mature pretty quickly in our climate. So with 2 years old, it is young. It is a young whiskey. I'm not going to deny that. We've bottled 2-year-old spirit before. B3.3 from memory. Treacle Buns in a Sawmill was a 2-year-old bourbon. Unbelievable spirit. It's ready when it's ready. And in this case, it's a smaller cask. There's a quarter cask, so 125-litre cask. That's just lovely on the nose. It's just really it's just really showing itself now. Question coming in: with an outturn of only 130 bottles, surely demand will way outstrip supply for this release. Yes, in a word, yes. I know that. We know that. In fact, if you have a read of Outturn, and I'm going to show it up on screen again here. If you have a read of Outturn, you can see this is this release. Have a read of the Outturn. It explains how this was the second pick, not in terms of the second pick, as in like the first cask that we picked out initially, which was a 200-litre cask, wasn't working. It had done one summer too many, and the distiller at Archie Rose said, "This isn't working. Let's go back to the drawing board." I'm so happy that process happened, because it means that we're not then over-egging the pudding. We're not sort of releasing something because we've got more quantity of it. We're releasing something because the quality was better in the other pick that we had. Let me grab something. Wow, there's heaps of questions coming in. Good question here. Okay. Oates says, why has it taken so long to bottle a whiskey from Australia? There's a number of reasons I'm going to go into very briefly right now about that. And Andrew sort of talks a bit about this in his article. First reason is a lot of the early stuff that we were offered up wasn't very good. And that's quite seriously the answer. It didn't pass panel. It was hot. It was astringent. It was a mess. It was tannic. It was butyric. There were all sorts of problems. Massive, massive flaws. The second reason is the price made no sense a few years ago. It really didn't. We looked at one cask years ago that would have been about the same age as this, about maybe 3 years old, maybe 4. And it would have had to have been $499 in an outturn for it to make any sense for anyone. And that's like a break even almost. It would have been sort of made no sense for us as a club to bottle it because the price didn't make sense. So the quality wasn't there for a lot of it. The price made no sense on some of it. And the third instance was these distillers that we're talking with most of the time just don't have the supply. They don't. We're talking about distilleries that are pushing out maybe 30,000 litres a year. And they have a mailing list that swallows it all up. So it's like, why would they sell us some of their best spirit and best casks if they don't have the capacity to even maintain their own? So that was a huge problem as well there. So that was something. I hope that answers your question, Oates. It was basically supply issues, cost issues, and quality. And in some cases, all three. None of them added up. And in this case, it really did. It made sense for us to actually explore it this time and say, okay, your spirit is interesting from this distillery, 147. I haven't even said the distillery name. You guys know what it is, though. This Sydney distillery, they had an extraordinary spirit. Their new make was unreal. 6 malt new make that was actually really just fascinating complexity to the malt, actually innovating on their spirit, unlike copying what your next door neighbors have done for most iterations, and actually building something that we really like the profile of. So we went through a whole bunch of casks and we ended up with this one because this is the favorite, and then we bottled it. Yes, I was, in fact. Here's a great question from Whiskey's My Jam. Were you there to taste the new make before it went into the cask, mate? Yes. I don't know if I tasted the exact new make that went into this exact cask, but I tasted those runs of new make that were done at the time. And in fact, many of you would have. I mean, a lot of it was bottled as 6 malt new make as a bottling from this distillery. And it was watered down to 50%, I think, for the 6 malt. But I tasted it a number of times. I even served it a number of times, even at 63, 65% ABV to punters and members at events as a chance for them to taste this new make. So we served it up quite a few times. What do Jacaranda flowers smell like? They smell like purple. They really do. They've got that sort of very oily, sweet kind of flower. I guess it's a certain sort of like a very, very common around Sydney, and especially during springtime. They're rich and very sort of like if you squash it between your fingers, it has a certain aroma. It has a certain floral aroma, of course, but it's a very distinct purple aroma. Does that make sense? How do you describe chicken? I don't know. Am I correct in that Apera casks are like an Australian sherry? Yes. Ex-Apera is Apera, short for aperitif. It's our way of saying sherry in Australia, because we shouldn't be using the word sherry because that's for that we should leave that for Jerez. We should leave that for the Spanish to use that word. Question coming in: any vision to do more releases to other parts of the world? Do you mean more Australian whiskey releases at the society that other branches will get? I sure hope so. We've got some more casks in production at the moment, and this is just the first one. This 147 is the first one. If you miss out on this one, don't stress. There's more Australian whiskey coming through. But this is just a bit of a milestone for us. This one is very important for us as a milestone. Keenan, you're one of the few who's already tasted it. I tried this at Whiskey Now a few days ago. It was superb. Dusty, chocolate, Illawarra plums, and coffee. More than deserved its place at the table. Keenan, I'm really glad that I've got some member feedback actually on this bottling before it's been released. That's incredible. And I'm going to agree with you. I actually think that the spirit and oak integrated really nicely. It wasn't overly oaky. The cask didn't just dominate that conversation, as we know. It very well can. And I think that even this distillery has put out some releases where the cask was dominated and put out some where the spirit has. But I think this one has met very much in the middle. And I think dusty sort of cocoa notes and chocolate and plum notes is very on target. It's very uniquely Australian tasting to me. I've tasted a lot of Australian whiskies, obviously. And I think this one is uniquely Australian in that I wouldn't confuse this immediately with being a Scotch whiskey. I would confuse it perhaps with being, I've tasted some other New World whiskies, whether they be sort of Indian whiskies or Japanese whiskies and things where there could be some confusion there, but it's unlikely. What AB was the new make when it went into the cask? I think this one went in at 63.4. May have been a little bit lower. I'll have to double check that. That's a good question. I'll have to double check that. And Ryan aptly says, and then we have someone saying, I still have a bottle of AR6 malt. Yes. You know what? It'd be really interesting if you do get a chance to try this 147. In fact, Mark, dear Mark Teague, your friends over at the New Sydney Hotel in Hobart are getting a bottle on the partner bar. So some of our partner bar network do have a bottle of this either coming or already have it. Of course, Archie Rose in Sydney have it. They're an interesting partner bar. I don't know why I mentioned them. And then Whiskey and Elm would have it, of course. New Sydney and Hobart will have it. But yeah, a few of our venues have it. Oh, and Bar Lafayette in Perth, of course. Don't forget our friends over out west. And lots of comments coming in. Steve M. Oates. Replying to Facebook is Steve. I take some time in the latest Outturn to explain why this is. See my column. I'm assuming that's Andrew. Andrew, hello. Yes, that's true. Andrew, I mentioned this at the beginning. The three parts of the story have been explained as to how this came about in the Outturn, in August Outturn. So please have a read. It's a very thick content issue. Question coming in here from Lee Waller. Sorry if I missed this answer while I'm cooking dinner. What size cask was it aged in? It was a quarter cask, a traditional sherry quarter cask, so technically 125-litre cask. So I hope that answers your question. And yes, big shout out to New Sydney Hotel in Hobart. They're a new partner bar for the society. If you're a Tasmanian and you want to explore this whiskey, jump in. Yep, howdy AD here. Look, there could have only been a few people who would have said, see my column. It's either you or Luke, so I'm going to go with you. So there you go. Excellent. Okay, so I actually, as well as tasting this whiskey tonight and giving you just a bit of a, taking your questions. There's so many questions coming in, which is great. I can't get to all of them, sorry. But taking on your questions and comments here, as I have a nose of this whiskey again, I think that the dusty dark chocolate note is really evident. And it's almost hard to separate that because we know the mash bill, we know the malts used in this. But at the same time, it's very, that dusty dark chocolate note. Keenan, I liked your observation. I still get a Cocoa Pops in this. I still get that sort of bowl of Cocoa Pops as a kid. No, Cocoa Pops are like fresh Jersey milk. There's caramel chew lollies as well. There's like caramel cubes. I don't know what they're called. It doesn't drink like it's 63.1. The proof on that is 63.1%. It doesn't drink like it. It sits much nicer, much more integrated on the palate than I was expecting. I actually want to bring up some photos. On the floor. Wasn't my whiskey, I don't mind. I'm going to show you some photos of the production process of this whiskey. Some of these photos made it into Outturn. Some didn't. We don't have so many pages within Outturn. So I want to show you some of the process of this was being made locally. Now there's a capsule that didn't work, for instance. That had to be reapplied. And that's Marguerite, I think, I think that's her hand holding that and working out how to get the seal right on these bottles. Here's some of the corks. I like showing you guys the behind the scenes. This is a process and production that has happened. This has been made locally for members in Australia, and I think that's really important. There's the green glass, the iconic green glass, getting its pre-rinse, if you like. It's making sure there's not a skerrick of dust or anything inside it. It's getting get air and water and air blasted. There's some micron just testing weights going on here with the spirit. There's some of the first labeled bottles that came off the production line. I had to take that photo. It's just like one of those moments like now it makes it real. In fact, I just want to Weather's Originals. Yeah, Caramel Chews, Weather's Originals. There is a bit of Weather's Original going on here. Actually, I will just make one quick comment about the production process here. You work on these casks and you work with the distiller, you work on the tasting panel, you do all these things to make sure that this is coming to fruition, something that is an important project for us locally, and to show the world what we can do and show the world that Australian whiskey has changed, is changing, and is getting better. Now, you look at you work on this stuff, and there's endless forms and spreadsheets and calculations and everything going on, and yet it's only when you pop a label, when you first pop a label on a bottle like that, on that photo there, that it makes it real. I hope you understand what I mean by that. It's only real once you see the finished copy. Then you're holding a bottle of it and you go, we got here. That's like, we made it. This is it. And that's why the cover says Australia, we made it. It says it on the front cover of Outturn. It's really important for us. I know I'm getting emotional about it, but it's true. It's important for us because it's sort of to go, you know, this is the where it started. This is sort of, there's all sorts of false starts and problems with quality, problems with price, problems with control, problems with everything. And then sort of for all the jigsaw pieces to come together is when you hold the end product and say, I was a part of that. And it's a part of our local branch history. We've got some great milestones in the Australian branch. Since 2002, since John and Andre started the branch, it's changed a lot, especially in the last 2 years, I can say. But it's in a good way. It's been fantastic. It's been such a positive journey. But anyway, before I get too emotional, I'll show you some of these behind-the-scenes photos of the production process. As I said, there's the first ones coming off the line. There's all the beautiful 147s pre-label, but capsules sitting on top, sitting pretty, waiting to go through the proper shrink there. I think actually maybe they've just been shrinked there. Yeah, they have. So you can see just in the top right of that corner, the Margaret with the heat gun. She's perfected the shrink on those seals. And sorry, I skipped a bit forward there. There they are, perfecting their shrink on the bottles. Each bottle got weighed to make sure that it had exactly 700 mils in each bottle. You know, don't want anyone having 695 or 705 mils. I'm sure many of you would appreciate getting 705 mils. And I love that photo. It's just the sort of everything, the production line. It's sort of all the bottles coming down, and I was then responsible for making sure I was doing a bit of QA, if you like, a bit of label work, making sure that the gap on the label is correct, the spacing and all that kind of stuff, and applying. And I should also mention, all the labels and all the capsules were hand sealed. There's the first case. There's the first 6 off the production line. That was really exciting as well. That's another moment where I go, you know what? We've made it. If it's sitting in the cardboard box, it's ready to go. There's a wider angle of everything going on that day. And, of course, the grey towel and everything, making sure that everything was that was sort of like almost the control bottle, if you like, that one there, to make sure that every other one that came off the line looked exactly like that. And it's, by the way, as I said, every single bottle was actually hand applied to make sure that, again, quality assurance that everything was working as we wanted them to. Some of the comments coming through, I should just throw up on the screen now. Glad to finally see this gem in a society bottling. Yes, it is so exciting for us to see this actually come to fruition. After they distributed partner bars, and partner bars haven't taken many, by the way. It's like 4 or 5 bars are getting it, maybe 6. Because some of them are closed, remember, like we're still living through this COVID nightmare. So they're not all of them are taking a bottle, and that's fine. How much does SMWS bottle weigh with 700 mils weigh? Oh, I remember on the day, the number echoing a few times on the day and me having to pay attention to that because it was like 1.536 or something kilos. Sorry, I actually didn't answer that question just before from who's asked. Sorry. Oh, no, it was actually Phil Murphy's question. Sorry, I'm losing my comments here. After they distributed part of us, how many available members? Look, it should be about 100 or so. We'll see we'll work that out closer to the Friday, and we'll have an exact number. But it's bottled for Australian members. Like we're not shipping a portion of it to the Japanese branch or the UK branch or US branch. We're keeping it all here, except for a couple of archive bottles. That's pretty much it. Yes, the profile is juicy oak and vanilla. That's correct. Scott, great question. We actually printed. I've still got half a reel. We printed. I think we had 250 labels printed of the front label and 500 of the back label. I've still got half the reel left in the cupboard. We busted up about maybe 30 or 40 labels on the day, so it was good to have overs. You've always got to have overs on those kind of things. Yeah, but definitely destroyed a few labels because if they didn't sit right, you take them off, they tear. You got to clean the bottle down and start again. You always want to get it right. It's such a pain when they tear, and we did it about 30 times. So the bottling of 129 or 28 bottles of whatever came off the line, it was about, I think it was about 3 or 4 hours of labeling and production, which sounds like not very much, but it's a lot. It's a long time for a small number of bottles, given these places can put down so much so quickly. But they're getting a new bottling line at this distillery, actually, so that's exciting. I'll show you some more little behind the scenes production photos. Then I'll get back into this taste of whiskey actually itself. There's the green glass bottles there, like I said, and that's with the neck seal on it. That's with the neck tag that has to be applied a certain way. The guidelines for production are very stringent, and we like to follow them, obviously. They got that they put an E accidentally in there, but you get what they mean. That's exciting seeing them getting palletized, getting ready to go to our warehouse. And there's some photos of the new site. There you go. This is not where our whiskey was made. This is where it was bottled. Our whiskey was distilled in their old site at this distillery, but very cool. And there's one of our first tastes off the production line. There's their new stills. It's quite a behemoth. It's quite a juggernaut going on over there. And some just a tiny fraction of the casks maturing in the back of the warehouse there. And there I am, happy as can be, pouring some whiskey out of a cask. Well, some of the many casks that we tried throughout each iteration of these events. This, of course, like I said, they are a partner bar as well, and they've got this fantastic bar out in Rosebery. I'm really bummed to hear, obviously, nothing's open at the moment, but once it is, really looking forward to getting back there and enjoying a few drams of course, 147.1 among other whiskies as we're there. Some of the great comments coming through. I'm going to have to jump onto some of these. I have an Aussie passport, born and bred, but in the UK. How do I get an Aussie membership? Yeah, that's tricky. That's tricky. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. There's no other way I can say that. Owen says, as a single cask from AR, is it correct that not all malts from the 6-malt mash bill are present due to their separate maturation process? Owen, that's the new way that they're creating their spirit. That is correct. As in, like, they will be using different parts and different percentages. I think they'll still be using all 6 at the same time at different times. But they will be using percentages of the malts in the maturation process. So it's not like it's going to be a perfect 1/6 of each. It's going to be sort of portion of, and they can adjust those portions very easily and very efficiently now in their new setup, which is fantastic. It's quite an incredible setup they've got in their new site. But this was distilled, this cask being 2 years ago, was distilled at their old site and was one of some, would have been in that last parcel of casks from the old site, which is kind of cool. And then we've got very much looking forward to visiting this distillery, 147. Yeah, me too. Yeah, I've never heard of it. It's great. You know, it's like, no, it's very exciting for us, and it's very exciting for us to actually get to this point, as I've said. And this is tonight. It's just a bit of an August preview. So I'm gonna have a bit of a taste again. I've just had one little sip so far. I'm gonna try it with a bit of water. I've already told you some of the tasting notes that I've been quite impressed with. I don't normally add water to sherried whiskies, but this one might appreciate. This might work. Andrew and I on our live tastings have added water to 30 and 38-year-old whiskies, and so you've got to have a play around with it. There's no sort of steadfast rules with this. There's rules of thumb, but there's no steadfast rules, in my opinion. Oh, and James, yes, thumbs up. Okay, let's have a nose of this. Let's have a nose of the water. Almost a bit more like fresh hay bales now with the water added. Slightly more like almost farmyardy about the nose now. It's still sweet, but just the savory notes, almost like the less so tropical fruit note is more there rather than the sweet notes. Powers along. That's just lovely. Delightful. Actually, I think that works really well with water. It is a young whiskey, so I assumed it would. Now, where can you taste this fantastic whiskey, this milestone of the Society's history? Good question, Matt. So what we do is we've actually put a little guide in Outturn where to taste this whiskey by the glass. We've made it. We want to make this as widespread and democratic as possible. We want to make sure that as many people can taste this whiskey and be a part of this story. Where to try the special release by the glass? Archie Rose Bar in Rosebery. Now this went to print before a new lockdown came through, so it's still there though. They have a bottle. I don't know if they're doing takeaway samples or anything. But you best message them about that. I don't know. Sorry. Whiskey and Almond in Melbourne, of course. I put the Australian Malt Whisky Tasting Championship 2021 SMWS bar, assuming that the championship was going ahead in late July, which it hasn't, because hey, we know why. So it's been moved to the 23rd of October, just for those wondering. Bar Lafayette in Perth, New Sydney Hotel in Hobart. And I'm going to miss someone, I'm sure. And of course, this month's virtual pack. Look, if you don't get a bottle of this, don't despair. It's also in the virtual pack. It's a chance for you to taste this whiskey is in the virtual pack, which looks a bit like this and is around the world virtual tasting. I'm actually really excited by this tasting coming up because It's a true around-the-world tasting. And the lineup, which is also already an Outturn, is very impressive indeed. So we've got Scotch whiskey, Japanese whiskey, Australian whiskey, Welsh whiskey, and American bourbon whiskey. So that's 5 very distinct countries, 5 very distinct whiskeys from each country. It's also, those playing along at home will remember this is what probably the first Japanese whiskey we've seen in, I'm going to go at least 5 years, maybe 6 years actually, probably closer to 6 now. But it's been a while, so it's really exciting to incorporate that back into the lineup. Same for Welsh whiskey. The last Welsh whiskey we've had a couple recently, but before that there was a bit of a drought. So the diversity of even the regions and countries of whiskey that we're able to present in these virtuals is extremely exciting, and I'm really excited to present this tasting along with Andrew. And we'll be doing that on the 20th of August, I think the date for that tasting is. I think, yes. And then of course virtual pub is back Saturday the 28th, and Melbourne lunch is Sunday the 29th, so that's a big weekend. And then lots going on, of course, as always. So that's what we're up to at the moment. I just want to have a bit of a taste of 147, tell you some of the stories behind it, show you some even more behind the scenes photos of how that release came about. I really enjoyed taking you on this journey. I've absolutely loved being a part of the production process and end result of building something like this, and bringing something unique to members is never, ever, and I say this, I've said this 100 times, there's never been a better time to be a member of the SMWS. If you're not already a member, my first question is, why not? The second question is, join. There's the link. smws.com.au. Use the code Jacaranda. If you're not a member, use the code Jacaranda. That's $30 off your membership, and choose any membership type. Go for it. Go nuts. And I hope to see you at some of our virtual or in-person events, depending on where you are, what you can access, and what you enjoy. In the meantime, I will leave you for now. Hope you have a wonderful night and wonderful week ahead. Outturn is this Friday, the 6th of August at midday AEST. Don't miss it, and I'll see you all soon. Cheers.